You're not lost, the truth philosophy reveals. Written by Ronnie Rowland. Published by Growth Literacy Lounge. You've felt it before. That quiet ache. The sense that something's missing, but you can't quite name it. You scroll, you work, you check the boxes. But deep down, something whispers, this isn't it. You're not broken. You're not lazy. You're simply disconnected, from yourself, from purpose, from the truth that philosophy has been trying to hand you for centuries. You're not lost. You're just looking in the wrong direction. We live in a world obsessed with shortcuts. Quick fixes. Surface-level solutions. But the human soul doesn't respond to hacks. It responds to meaning. That's why real answers feel ancient, because they are. The world's greatest minds, from Stoics to samurai, from sages to scientists, have all wrestled with the same questions. Who am I? Why am I here? And how do I stop feeling like I'm drifting? This book is not a self-help manual. It is a wake-up call. A return to truth, not through fluffy optimism, but through raw, unfiltered clarity. Philosophy is not about big words or distant theories. It's about the battlefield in your mind. It's about reclaiming your time, mastering your thoughts, and remembering what matters. As Viktor Frankl once said, when a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. This isn't about escape. This is about facing yourself. Because clarity isn't found in comfort. It's found in courage. And once you see the truth, you'll realize you were never lost. You were just waiting to remember the way back. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Myth of Being Lost. Picture this. You're standing in the middle of a crowded street, noise all around you, honking horns, glowing screens, people rushing past. And yet you feel alone. Not in the physical sense, but somewhere deeper. Like your life is happening, but you're not really in it. Most people don't talk about this feeling. They just keep going. Smile for the camera. Check the email. Scroll. Perform. They convince themselves that if they just get the next job, the next relationship, the next dopamine hit, then maybe, just maybe, it'll all click into place. But it never does. And that's where the myth begins. The myth that you're lost. That you've fallen behind. That everyone else has it figured out, and you're just wandering in circles. But what if that's not true? What if the feeling of being lost isn't a sign that something's wrong, but a sign that something real is trying to get your attention? What if lost is just a word we use before we learn to see clearly? Philosophy has been trying to tell us this for thousands of years. Not in academic textbooks, but in the lived experience of those who faced chaos and refused to let it define them. People like Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire while battling internal storms. Or Epictetus, born a slave, who taught that you could be free even in chains. They didn't sugarcoat life. They didn't say it was easy. But they understood that meaning isn't something you find. It's something you create. Modern life has a way of making you forget that. It turns your attention outward, toward comparison, consumption, performance. You measure your worth by likes, by followers, by bank balances. But no amount of achievement can fill the gap that only purpose was meant to occupy. This is where philosophy enters, not as an escape, but as a mirror. It holds up the truth, whether you're ready for it or not. And the truth is simple. You were never meant to drift. You were built to choose. But choice requires awareness. And awareness requires stillness. And stillness is rare in a world that profits from your distraction. That's why most people feel lost, because they've outsourced their sense of direction to the noise. They've forgotten how to navigate from within. They've mistaken movement for meaning. But look closer. The moment you stop running, the moment you sit with yourself in silence, something ancient starts to rise. Not a voice, exactly. More like a remembering. A remembering that you are not behind. You are not broken. You are not late. You are exactly where you're supposed to be, at the beginning of your path back to truth. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." But maybe it's deeper than that. Maybe the unexamined life isn't just unworthy. Maybe it's unrecognizable. Maybe the reason you don't feel at home in your own life is because you're living someone else's version of it. This chapter isn't about blame. It's about awareness. It's about rejecting the lie that you need to be more, do more, or become someone else to feel whole. It's about remembering that the compass isn't broken. You've just been holding it upside down. So pause. Breathe. Not everything is a race. Not every step needs a GPS coordinate. Some of the most important journeys don't look like progress. They look like stillness. They look like doubt. They look like this moment right here. Because this is where it begins. Not when you figure everything out. But when you realize you were never really lost. You just stopped listening. And now you're starting to hear again. Chapter 2: The Enemy Within. No one ever tells you that the biggest fight of your life will be the one you never see coming. Not against the world. Not against your circumstances. But against yourself. It's subtle at first. A small hesitation. A quiet excuse. That voice in your head that says, not today. You're tired. You're not ready. You're not enough. You think it's reason. You think it's logic. But it's fear, dressed in a costume of caution. The enemy within doesn't shout. It whispers. It hides behind comfort, behind perfectionism, behind every distraction that feels like rest but leaves you empty. And every time you choose the path of least resistance, it grows stronger. Philosophers have long warned us about this internal battle. Marcus Aurelius called it the inner citadel, the part of you that must remain unmoved, no matter the storm. Seneca warned of the mind's tendency to make monsters out of shadows. And Musashi, though a man of the sword, understood that the most dangerous opponent was the one inside his own chest. You don't need a battlefield to be at war. All it takes is a goal. A dream. A commitment. And the moment you set your sights on something higher, resistance will rise to meet you. That's not a flaw. It's a signal. The greater the resistance, the closer you are to something that matters. But most people turn back. Not because they lack talent. Not because they're incapable. But because they believe the voice that tells them to stop. They confuse comfort with peace, and fear with wisdom. The truth is, the path of growth will always be uncomfortable. It has to be. Because you're moving beyond who you were. And the self you've known, your habits, your excuses, your safe routines, will fight to survive. So the question isn't, how do I make the fear go away? The question is, am I willing to move forward anyway? You don't overcome the enemy within by arguing with it. You overcome it by acting in spite of it. Discipline is not about suppressing fear. It's about making fear irrelevant. The Stoics had a word for this, prohairesis, the ability to choose your response, no matter the situation. You can't control the thoughts that arise. But you can control which ones you obey. That's the real battlefield. Not the world outside, but the space between thought and action. And every time you choose action over avoidance, you win. Not all victories are loud. Sometimes they look like getting out of bed when you don't feel like it. Sometimes they look like saying no when it would be easier to say yes. Sometimes they look like sitting alone in silence instead of drowning your discomfort in noise. These are the moments that shape you. Not the big wins. Not the applause. But the tiny, invisible battles that no one sees but you. And when you start stacking those wins, something shifts. You stop fearing the enemy. Because you realize it was never an enemy at all. Just a test. A test of will. A test of choice. A test of how badly you want to become who you say you are. And here's the truth. You don't have to be fearless. You just have to be faithful to the version of you that's waiting on the other side of resistance. The version of you that already exists. But can only be accessed through action. So next time the voice whispers, "You can't do this," smile. Because now you know. That voice is not your truth. It's your threshold. And it only has power if you stop walking. Chapter 3: The Discipline of Direction. You don't drift into mastery. You don't stumble your way into purpose. You choose it. And then you choose it again. Every morning. Every hour. Every time the world offers you an easier path. People think discipline is a punishment. They think it's about denial, about grinding, about pushing yourself until you break. But real discipline? It's alignment. It's deciding who you are, and then living like you mean it. Philosophers understood this. Not as theory, but as survival. When Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do," he wasn't writing a motivational quote. He was giving you a blueprint. Because if you don't choose your direction, the world will choose it for you. Algorithms. Advertisements. Expectations. You'll be pulled in 1,000 directions, chasing a life that isn't yours. Until one day you look up and wonder how you ended up so far from yourself. Discipline is the antidote to that drift. It doesn't make life easier. It makes life yours. The truth is, most people aren't lazy. They're distracted. They're constantly reacting, never creating, never steering. And they confuse motion with progress. Busy with everything. Focused on nothing. Discipline is not about doing more. It's about doing what matters. It's a filter. You look at your life and ask, does this move me forward? If it doesn't, you cut it. Even if it's easy. Even if it's popular. Even if it makes you feel good in the moment. Because mastery is never built on feeling good. It's built on doing what's necessary, even when it's boring. Even when no one's watching. Especially then. The gym. The journal. The quiet mornings. The hard conversations. These are the things that shape you. Not in dramatic ways. But in subtle, steady, irreversible ones. Because discipline compounds. And one disciplined day turns into a disciplined week. Then a month. Then a life. But here's the part no one tells you, discipline isn't something you're born with. It's something you build. It's not about being special. It's about being intentional. The Stoics didn't wait for motivation. They trained their minds the way warriors trained their bodies. They wrote. They reflected. They practiced hardship on purpose. Because they knew the storms would come. And when they did, they didn't want to rely on luck. They wanted to rely on character. That's what discipline gives you. Not just habits. But identity. It's not, I have to do this. It's, this is who I am. And once you cross that line, once your actions reflect your values instead of your moods, you become untouchable. Not because life gets easier. But because you become harder to shake. You can still feel pain. Still face setbacks. But they don't define you. Because your compass doesn't shift with the wind. You've chosen your direction. And every action points to it. That's the real gift of discipline. Not perfection. Not control. But clarity. You don't need to do everything. You just need to do the right things, consistently. So no, you're not lost. You're just unpracticed. You're just waiting to remember what it feels like to be in alignment. To walk a path you actually chose. To move with intention instead of inertia. And the first step? Isn't dramatic. It's not a speech. It's not a breakthrough. It's a decision. One decision, repeated over time, that says, this is who I am. This is where I'm going. And this is what I'm willing to do to get there. Not once. But every single day. Chapter 4. The War on Distraction. The battle for your mind doesn't look like a battlefield. It looks like a feed. A notification. A tab you forgot was open. It looks harmless. But it's not. Distraction isn't random. It's engineered. Built to keep you chasing things that feel urgent instead of things that are important. Every ping, every scroll, every algorithm is designed to hijack your attention. And the worst part is you let it. You don't mean to. You tell yourself you'll just check for a minute. Then an hour disappears. You tell yourself you'll start later. Then a week goes by. Until one day, you realize you haven't been living. You've been reacting. You've been giving your time, the most valuable thing you have, to things that don't matter. Philosophy teaches that attention is everything. Because where your attention goes, your life goes. Seneca warned, life is long if you know how to use it. But most people don't. Not because they're incapable, but because they've never been taught to protect their focus. In the past, distractions were external. Noise, interruptions, obstacles. Today, the distraction is internalized. It lives in your pocket. In your hand. In your mind. You carry it with you. Everywhere. That's why you feel scattered. Why it's hard to focus. Why you can't finish a book, a thought, or a sentence without checking something. It's not just a bad habit. It's a war. A war for your awareness. And if you don't learn to fight back, you'll spend your life being pulled in directions you didn't choose. Miyamoto Musashi understood this long before smartphones existed. He believed in eliminating anything that didn't serve the path. He wrote, "Do nothing that is of no use." That includes what you consume, what you give your time to, what you allow into your mind. Distraction doesn't just waste time. It weakens resolve. It trains your brain to seek novelty over depth, comfort over challenge, consumption over creation. And over time, it steals something far more important than productivity. It steals presence. You stop being in your life. You start watching it from the sidelines. But here's the truth. Focus isn't a talent. It's a discipline. It's something you build. Something you guard. You don't need perfect conditions to focus. You need boundaries. You need to say no. You need to create silence, on purpose. The world will not give you peace. You have to claim it. Turn off the noise. Schedule solitude. Practice boredom. Do the hard thing first. Read something without checking your phone. Sit in a room without reaching for stimulation. Let your mind stretch past the default settings. It will feel uncomfortable at first. That's normal. You've been trained to avoid silence. But silence is where the truth waits. And if you can learn to sit with it, you'll start hearing what you've been missing. You'll remember what matters. You'll feel your focus return. Not like a lightning bolt, but like a slow inhale. Like a part of you coming back online. Because it was never gone. Just buried. Distraction isn't just a productivity issue. It's a spiritual one. A distracted mind cannot be a free mind. And freedom begins the moment you choose to reclaim your attention. Not someday. Now. In this moment. By choosing to be here. Fully. The war on distraction will never end. But that's not the point. The point is to fight. Every day. Every moment. With clarity. With discipline. With intention. Because your life will follow your attention. And it's time to decide where you're going. Chapter 5: The Power of Stillness. Most people don't fear movement. They fear stillness. Because stillness forces you to feel. To face the thoughts you've buried under busyness. To hear the parts of yourself you've been trying to ignore. That's why so many people keep running. Not towards something, but away. Away from silence. Away from discomfort. Away from truth. But the truth doesn't chase you. It waits. In the quiet. In the pause between distractions. In the moment you stop trying to outrun your own mind. Stillness isn't weakness. It's strength. It's the foundation of clarity, of wisdom, of self-mastery. And yet, in a world obsessed with doing, stillness looks like laziness. Like you're falling behind. But here's the paradox. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. Not in the passive sense. But in the deliberate, conscious act of stopping. Of listening. Of becoming fully present. Philosophy has always pointed us here. The Stoics practiced stillness through reflection. Buddhists through meditation. Warriors like Musashi through observation. He studied his opponents in silence. He watched. He waited. Because he knew that action without awareness is wasted motion. We don't suffer from lack of action. We suffer from mindless action. From doing for the sake of doing. From moving without meaning. Stillness creates space. Space to think. To feel. To observe without reacting. It's in that space that wisdom speaks. But most people never give it a chance. They fill every gap. Music. podcasts, notifications, noise. Even in rest they run. But rest is not the same as stillness. Rest is recovery. Stillness is revelation. When was the last time you sat without reaching for something? No phone. No agenda. Just you, your breath, and the moment? It sounds simple. But it's rare. Because it takes courage to meet yourself without distraction. Stillness reveals what you've been avoiding. The fears you haven't named. The desires you haven't acknowledged. The pain you've numbed with productivity. But it also reveals something else, your strength. Your resilience. Your inner compass. The voice that knows who you are and what you're meant to do. In stillness, that voice gets louder. Not in volume, but in clarity. It doesn't beg. It doesn't shout. It simply says, "This is the way." Musashi once said, "Fixation is the way to death. Fluidity is the way to life." Stillness creates that fluidity. It teaches you to flow rather than force. To respond rather than react. It sharpens your perception. Trains your mind. Centers your actions. Because the goal is not to move fast. It's to move right. You don't find your path by running faster. You find it by stopping long enough to see where you are. And once you see clearly, movement becomes powerful again. Not frantic. Not desperate. But directed. Stillness is not the absence of effort. It's the presence of focus. It's what separates noise from signal, motion from meaning, chaos from clarity. In a world that rewards the hustle, stillness is rebellion. It's a refusal to let urgency dictate your values. A declaration that your mind is your own. So stop. Breathe. Be still. Not because you're weak, but because you're ready to listen. Ready to lead. Ready to return to yourself. The world will keep spinning. Let it. You are not lost. You're just remembering how to stand still. And sometimes, that's where the real journey begins. Chapter 6. Identity is a choice. Most people think identity is something you discover. Like it's hiding somewhere, waiting to be found. But identity isn't found. It's built. It's forged in the fire of your choices, your habits, your patterns of thought. And every day, whether you realize it or not, you're casting votes for the person you are becoming. That's the truth no one tells you. You're not stuck because of your past. You're stuck because you keep acting like it still defines you. You replay the same story. You speak the same limitations. You say, "I'm just not disciplined," or "I've always been this way." But that's not identity. That's memory. And memory is not destiny. Philosophy cuts through this illusion. It reminds us that we are not our feelings. We are not our impulses. We are what we consistently do. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." In other words, identity begins with a decision. Not a declaration. Not a fantasy. A decision. Most people wait to feel ready before they change. They wait to be motivated. To be inspired. But waiting is just another form of resistance. If you want to become someone new, you act like them, before it feels natural. You do what they would do. Over and over. Until it becomes true. It's not fake. It's training. You train yourself into who you want to be. Musashi didn't become a master by accident. He became a master by acting like one long before he was one. By carrying himself with intention. By rejecting comfort. By aligning his actions with the warrior he was choosing to become. He didn't let feelings dictate his discipline. He let his purpose dictate his practice. That's the power you have right now. You can stop identifying with who you've been. And start embodying who you want to be. Not by thinking. By doing. And yes, it will feel uncomfortable at first. Because your current identity will fight to survive. It will whisper, "That's not you." It will try to drag you back to what's familiar. Not because it's right. But because it's known. And the mind clings to what it knows, even when it hurts. But every time you choose a new action, you weaken the grip of the old self. Every time you show up, follow through, and keep your word, you carve a new path. One step. One decision. One habit at a time. Eventually, that path becomes who you are. Not because you told the world, but because you proved it to yourself. Identity is not something you're born with. It's something you build. Brick by brick. Choice by choice. It is the cumulative weight of your decisions. So the question isn't, who am I? The question is, who am I becoming? And more importantly, what choices am I making that lead me there? You don't have to wait for a new year. You don't need a rock bottom. You need clarity. And commitment. Pick the identity you want. Then earn it. Every time you show up when it's hard. Every time you act in alignment with your highest self. You cast a vote. And eventually those votes add up. You become the type of person who no longer needs to fake it. Because it's no longer a performance. It's who you are. And that's the truth philosophy reveals. You are not lost. You are just in the middle of a decision. One that, if made with intention, can change everything. Chapter 7: Pain is a teacher. Everyone wants growth. But no one wants pain. And yet they are the same thing. You can't grow without discomfort. You can't evolve without breaking patterns. And breaking patterns hurts. That's why most people stay the same. Not because they can't change, but because they can't stand the feeling of becoming someone new. Growth isn't clean. It's messy. It's uncomfortable. It drags you into the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. It stretches you past your excuses, exposes your fears, and forces you to confront your limits. And in that moment you have a choice. Numb it. Run from it. Or learn from it. Pain doesn't show up to punish you. It shows up to teach you. To sharpen you. To show you where you've been asleep. The Stoics knew this. Seneca wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." They didn't pray for ease. They trained for adversity. They welcomed hardship like a coach, not an enemy. Musashi lived by this. He subjected himself to conditions most people would avoid. Isolation. Hardship. Solitude. Not because he enjoyed suffering, but because he understood what it produced. Resilience. Focus. Clarity. You don't become strong by accident. You become strong by facing resistance. By staying in the fire long enough to let it forge something new. Most people misread pain. They think it means stop. That they've failed. That something's wrong. But pain doesn't always mean you're on the wrong path. Sometimes it means you're finally on the right one. Because real growth begins where comfort ends. Think about it. Every version of you that came before this moment, every breakthrough, every insight, every upgrade, was born through a moment of discomfort. It's never been easy. But it's always been worth it. And yet we're conditioned to run from it. To fix it. To medicate it. To silence it before we understand it. But pain has a language. And if you listen, it tells you exactly where to go. That ache in your chest when you lie to yourself? That's your integrity calling. That frustration in your job? That's your purpose knocking. That sting when you see someone doing what you dream of? That's not envy. That's direction. Pain, when viewed through the lens of philosophy, becomes a compass. It points to the places you need to examine. The habits you need to change. The truths you need to accept. It's not there to break you. It's there to build you. But only if you stop numbing it. Only if you're willing to sit with it long enough to hear what it has to say. That's the difference between people who grow and people who don't. Not the amount of pain, but the way they respond to it. You can use pain as an excuse. Or you can use it as fuel. You can let it define you. Or you can let it refine you. Musashi didn't avoid the pain of solitude, the pain of failure, the pain of sacrifice. He embraced it. Because he knew who he was becoming. And you have the same choice. To stop running. To stop pretending. To stop blaming the pain, and start learning from it. You don't need a painless life. You need a purpose strong enough to make the pain worth it. So when pain comes, and it will, don't flinch. Don't retreat. Breathe. Listen. Grow. Because pain isn't the enemy. It's the doorway. And the life you want is on the other side. Chapter 8. Environment shapes the mind. You become what surrounds you. Not all at once. But slowly. Subtly. Like water wearing down stone. The voices you hear. The spaces you occupy. The energy you tolerate. It all leaves a mark. People think they have full control over their mind. But your mind is porous. It absorbs. It reflects. It adapts to whatever it's exposed to most. That's why some people stay stuck. Not because they lack discipline, but because they've built a life that rewards the opposite. Distraction. Comfort. Mediocrity. You can't grow in an environment that feeds your weakness. You can't build focus in a space designed to fracture it. You can't chase excellence while surrounded by people who fear it. Philosophy doesn't ignore this. It confronts it. The Stoics weren't only disciplined internally. They were selective externally. They chose what to read, who to speak with, where to live. Not because they were elitist, but because they understood that peace is not just a mindset. It's a setting. Musashi lived alone, trained alone, traveled without attachments. Not because he hated people, but because he protected his clarity like a warrior guards a sword. He knew that distraction doesn't always come as noise. Sometimes it comes as comfort disguised as friendship, as validation disguised as connection, as ease disguised as peace. Look at your life. Not emotionally. Objectively. Does your space align with your values? Do the people around you challenge you or drain you? Do your habits support your highest self, or your most comfortable one? You don't rise above your environment. You reflect it. And if you're not intentional, it will define you without your consent. That's why change often starts with subtraction. Not adding more, but removing what doesn't serve. Not fixing, but letting go. Clear the clutter. Rearrange the space. Turn off the noise. Limit the opinions. Guard your inputs like your life depends on it, because it does. People talk about self-mastery like it's a solo mission. But even the strongest mind bends under constant exposure. You can meditate every morning, journal every night, and still fall apart in an environment that contradicts everything you're trying to build. Because discipline is fragile, especially in the early stages. And if you place that discipline in chaos, it will dissolve. Musashi didn't wait for ideal circumstances. He created them. He sought isolation not for escape, but for refinement. He understood that the mind is like a blade, and every environment either sharpens it or dulls it. You don't need to move to a mountain, but you do need to look around. What's pulling you away from your path? What's reinforcing the version of you you're trying to outgrow? And more importantly, what would your environment look like if you actually respected your potential? Maybe fewer screens. Maybe deeper conversations. Maybe more silence. Maybe more time alone. It's not about being perfect. It's about being precise. You can't control everything, but you can control what you allow. So take ownership. Not just of your mind, but of the soil it grows in. Because growth isn't just about effort. It's about placement. Plant a seed in the wrong environment, it dies. Plant it in the right one, and it thrives without force. Your future depends on what you're rooted in. So ask yourself honestly, is this space helping me grow? Or is it slowly convincing me to stay the same? Choose carefully. Then choose again. Every single day. Chapter 9. The Illusion of Later. There is no someday. There is only now, or never. And yet most people live in a constant negotiation with time, promising themselves they'll start tomorrow, next week, when things settle down, when they feel ready. But readiness is a lie. It's a myth wrapped in comfort. A delay disguised as strategy. And it's how most people waste their lives. Later feels safe. It lets you hold on to your potential without having to confront the risk of failure. It lets you dream without doing. Plan without committing. Hope without action. But you can't grow from the sidelines. You can't transform from a distance. Musashi never waited. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't wait for ideal conditions. He acted decisively, consistently, without excuse. Because he understood something most people never do. Time is not guaranteed. It's borrowed. Philosophy makes this clear. Memento mori, remember death. Not as something to fear, but something to frame your choices. Because when you forget you're mortal, you drift. You delay. You imagine there will always be more time. But there won't be. Not for the dream. Not for the healing. Not for the change. Every moment you wait, the life you want slips further away. You tell yourself you're not ready. But what if that's exactly why you need to begin? Readiness doesn't precede action. It's born from it. No one becomes disciplined by thinking about discipline. No one becomes courageous by waiting for fear to pass. You step into it. You do it afraid. You do it uncertain. And that's how the new self emerges, through the discomfort of now. Later is seductive because it asks nothing from you. No pain. No risk. No failure. But it also gives you nothing. No progress. No clarity. No power. Musashi stepped into every duel knowing he could die. He didn't flinch. He moved forward because delay was more dangerous than action. He knew hesitation kills, not just on the battlefield, but in life. You may not carry a sword, but you battle the same enemy, hesitation. It comes in the form of overthinking, of self-doubt, of unnecessary planning. You convince yourself that more information will make you braver. But information without action is just another distraction. The Stoics said, don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. That means doing the thing. Now. While it's messy. While it's uncomfortable. While your hands shake and your mind doubts. Because later doesn't build character. Now does. You already know what needs to be done. You've known for a while. The habit you need to break. The conversation you need to have. The goal you keep pushing to the edge of your calendar. So stop waiting. Not because time is running out. But because this moment is too valuable to waste. Life won't slow down for your hesitation. It won't pause so you can find clarity. It moves. And if you don't move with it, you get left behind by your own potential. Start before you're ready. Speak before it's perfect. Act before the doubt fades. Because later is just a softer way of saying never. And you were not made to live in delay. You were made to move. To decide. To become. Now. Chapter 10: Freedom Through Limits. Most people chase freedom by removing limits. No rules. No restrictions. No boundaries. They want to do whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want. But that's not freedom. That's chaos. And chaos always leads back to captivity. Because without structure you drift. Without direction you wander. And without discipline, your desires become your prison. Real freedom isn't the absence of limits. It's the presence of the right ones. Philosophy knew this all along. Epictetus was born in chains, yet taught that the only true prison is a mind that obeys impulse. Musashi lived without luxury, yet was more free than most emperors. Because they understood that freedom is not about indulgence. It's about self-governance. You don't become free by doing everything. You become free by mastering something. You become free by setting a boundary and keeping it. By choosing discomfort on purpose. By sacrificing ease for clarity. Look at your own life. The things that trap you aren't the rules you set. They're the ones you avoid. The phone you can't put down. The habit you can't break. The commitment you keep dodging. Those aren't freedoms. They're chains. Disguised as choices. Limits are not your enemy. They're the rails that keep the train on the track. The edges that give your path shape. Without them, you don't expand, you collapse. Musashi didn't wake up each day wondering what he felt like doing. He trained. He observed. He sharpened. Not out of obligation, but out of alignment. Because the boundaries he built gave his life meaning. That's what most people miss. They think limits are constraints. But the right limits create power. When you say no to distraction, you say yes to depth. When you say no to comfort, you say yes to growth. When you say no to everything, you create space for what actually matters. You don't need more time. You need fewer leaks. You don't need more freedom. You need to decide what your freedom is for. There's a kind of peace that only shows up when you know your boundaries. When you don't have to negotiate with yourself every hour. When you wake up and already know your path, because you designed it. That's not restriction. That's liberation. The truth is, unlimited options create anxiety. Because without a clear direction, you're always second-guessing. You're always wondering if there's a better path. A better method. A better version. But once you choose your limits, really choose them, clarity returns. You stop browsing through life and start building it. Deliberately. Day by day. Musashi wrote. Do nothing that is of no use. That's not a slogan. It's a standard. It means everything you do should serve your aim. If it doesn't, it goes. It's simple. It's brutal. It's freeing. Because when you're willing to cut away what doesn't matter, what's left is purpose. So don't fear structure. Don't resist routine. Don't run from the line you've drawn. Honor it. Reinforce it. Live by it. Because the boundary you set is the self you build. And one day, when life tries to pull you off course, when distractions call, when comfort whispers, when the world tempts you to drift, you'll stay rooted. Not because you're stubborn, but because you're free. Not in the way most people define it, but in the way that actually matters. Free to choose. Free to stay. Free to become. By deciding what to limit, you decide who to become. Chapter 11. The Way is Within. You've been searching. For answers. For direction. For something to make the noise stop and the path clear. But every time you reach outward, you come back empty. Because the truth was never out there. It was always in you. The way isn't hidden. It's buried. Beneath layers of doubt, fear, and distraction. Beneath who you were told to be. Beneath everything you thought you needed to chase. And the moment you stop running, you start remembering. That's what philosophy is for. Not to give you answers, but to strip away illusions. To remove what is not you, so what is can finally rise. It's not a map. It's a mirror. Musashi understood this. He didn't follow a system. He didn't worship tradition. He lived with intensity, but not rigidity. Because he knew that the real path doesn't come from outside approval. It comes from internal alignment. He called it the way. Not a destination, but a way of being. A way of walking. A way of showing up, every single day, rooted in clarity and stripped of excess. No drama. No performance. Just practice. And that's what this all comes down to. Not grand gestures. Not perfect routines. Practice. A quiet commitment to living with intention. A decision, repeated in silence, that says, I will not betray myself. I will not waste this life. I will not be owned by fear, or laziness, or noise. Because I know who I am. Or if I don't know yet, I know I'm willing to find out. Not through thought alone, but through action. Through showing up in the moments that don't make headlines. The early mornings. The hard conversations. The habits no one sees. That's the real work. That's the way. And it's not easy. You'll fall. You'll forget. You'll get distracted. But the way doesn't punish. It waits. Every time you return, it welcomes you. Not with applause, but with presence. With clarity. With peace. Because this path isn't about becoming someone else. It's about returning to who you've always been. Before the fear. Before the noise. Before the world told you to be more palatable, more polished, more distracted. Philosophy reminds you that your life is your responsibility. Not your parents'. Not your culture's. Not the algorithms'. Yours. You can keep waiting for someone to save you. Or you can save yourself. Not with a dramatic change, but with a shift so quiet the world won't notice. But you will. The shift from hoping to choosing. From drifting to directing. From asking the way to becoming it. Musashi didn't become a legend because he followed rules. He became a legend because he followed truth. His truth. And he was willing to pursue it alone. That's the price of mastery. Not perfection. But solitude. Not applause. But peace. So here you are. At the end, which is also the beginning. Not of a new life. But of a new way to live this one. With eyes open. With mind steady. With heart clear. You're not lost. You're just remembering. That the discipline, the peace, the strength. They were never something to earn. They were something to return to. So walk. Not because the path is clear. But because it's yours. And because now you finally see. The way isn't somewhere out there. The way is within. Take care and be well.